He didn't know the laptop bag sitting open on my desk wasn't just a laptop bag. My brother always called me the boring one, the responsible one, the one who took a safe government job instead of joining his startup, who drove a 10-year-old Civic, who brought store-brand wine to Thanksgiving because, in his words, I didn't know how to live. For years, I let that narrative stick. It was easier than explaining what I actually did for a living. My name doesn't matter right now. What matters is what happened on a Tuesday afternoon in March, when my brother walked into my home office while I was on a call, picked up a ceramic mug I'd had since college, and threw it at the back of my head. I didn't black out. That was the first thing I thought when I hit the floor. I didn't black out. I could feel the carpet fibers against my cheek. I could hear him breathing. And I could hear the faint hum from the device on my desk, still running, still recording, as it always did when I was working from home. He didn't know about that part. I should back up. My parents divorced when I was 9. My dad moved to Portland. My mom stayed in Dayton with me and my older brother, who I'll call my brother because that's how I still think of him, even now. Not by his name, not by what he became, just by the role he filled and eventually destroyed. We weren't close growing up, but we weren't enemies either. He was 4 years older, louder, funnier. He got the friends, I got the grades. He got the charm, I got the scholarship. He went to Ohio State on our mom's savings, dropped out after 2 years, and started a string of businesses that never quite made it. A meal prep service, a real estate wholesaling thing, some kind of app that he couldn't fully explain to me at Christmas dinner in 2019. I went to Georgetown on a merit scholarship, majored in computer science with a minor in linguistics, and got recruited my junior year by a federal agency I'm not going to name. I've worked there for 6 years. My official title, the one on LinkedIn, is Data Systems Analyst. My actual work involves things I can't talk about at dinner parties, which is partly why I stopped going to them. I'm telling you this because you need to understand what my brother thought I was versus what I actually was. In his mind, I was the government drone, the paper pusher, the one who would always answer his calls when he needed to borrow money and never quite had the guts to say no. He was right about one thing. I had trouble saying no. That was the real problem. It started with the house. Our maternal grandmother passed away in November, 14 months before that Tuesday in March. She left a modest estate, a paid-off house in Kettering, about $43,000 savings account, and some furniture that was worth more in sentiment than in dollars. She left it to my mom with a handwritten note saying she hoped it would keep the family steady. My mom has macular degeneration. She can still see, but she can't drive anymore. Can't read, standard print, needs help with a lot of day-to-day things. When Grandma died, I flew back to Dayton and stayed for 2 weeks to help sort through everything. My brother showed up for 3 days, took 2 boxes of stuff he claimed were promised to him, and left. He came back in January. By then, our mom had decided to sell the Kettering house and use the proceeds to move into a smaller place closer to her eye doctor and her church friends. That made sense. The house needed work, and maintaining it alone wasn't realistic for her. She asked me to help her find a real estate attorney and review the paperwork. She asked my brother to help her sort through the storage unit. What she didn't know, what I didn't know until February, was that my brother had found the savings account, the $43,000. He'd convinced our mom to add him to the account to help her manage it. She trusted him. She's always trusted him more than she should have, the way mothers sometimes do with their oldest, the one they remember as a little boy even when he's 37 and borrowing money for a security deposit. By the time I logged into her online banking portal to help her set up autopay for her new apartment's utilities, $38,500 was gone. I sat at her kitchen table for a long time without saying anything. My mom was in the living room, watching the news with her magnifying reader. The refrigerator hummed. I looked at the transaction history. 17 withdrawals over 6 weeks, all ATM cash, all under $3,000, structured to stay below the reporting threshold. He knew exactly what he was doing. I asked my mom gently if she'd taken out any cash recently. She said no, maybe $20 here and there, but nothing big. I asked if my brother had mentioned needing money. She paused. She said he'd mentioned some investment opportunity, a business he was partnering on. She said he'd told her it was for the family. I didn't say anything else that night. I helped her with the utilities. I made her dinner. I hugged her goodnight, drove back to my rental car, sat in the parking lot of a Kroger, and called a colleague who works in financial crimes. Not as a friend call, as a professional call. I want to be clear about something. I didn't set a trap. That's not what happened. I didn't manufacture what came next or engineer a confrontation. What I did was document what I already had: the bank records, the withdrawal pattern, the account addition paperwork, the timeline, and I sent it to the right people through the right channels. What I did not do was tell my brother. He found out I knew some other way. I still don't know exactly how. Maybe my mom mentioned I'd been looking at statements. Maybe he saw something in her call log. Maybe he just knew me well enough to recognize when I went quiet that I was doing something. My brother has always had a paranoid streak dressed up as intuition. He showed up at my apartment on a Tuesday afternoon without calling. I was working from home, which I do 3 days a week. I had a call scheduled. My work laptop was open, the peripheral device running. My door has a camera doorbell, and I buzzed him in without thinking twice because he's my brother. And I still hadn't fully let myself believe what I was looking at in those bank records even after 2 weeks of staring at them. He came in looking normal. That's the part that stays with me. He was wearing a Patagonia pullover and jeans. He'd gotten a haircut. He sat down in my kitchen and asked if I wanted coffee, like he was the one at home. I said sure. He made 2 cups. He knows where I keep everything. I've had the same apartment for 4 years, and he sat back down and looked at me. He said, "You need to drop it." I said I didn't know what he was talking about. He said, "Yes, you do. And you need to drop it, because if you don't, I'm going to make things very difficult for you with Mom. She's already upset about the house sale. She doesn't need you stirring things up." I told him I was going to need him to pay back what he took. He laughed. Not a funny laugh, a short, tight sound. "Pay back," he said. "It was a loan. Mom agreed to a loan. Mom doesn't remember agreeing to a loan," I said. "And there's no documentation. She's got bad eyes," he said. "Not a bad memory." He wrapped his hands around his coffee mug. "Drop it, or I make this a nightmare for you. I'll tell people you've been mismanaging her finances. I'll tell her you've been talking to lawyers without her permission," I said. "I have been talking to a lawyer. It's her estate lawyer, she knows." His face changed. He stood up. He picked up my coffee mug, the one I'd had since college, Georgetown ceramic, navy blue, and he threw it at me. I don't know if he meant to hit me directly or if he was just throwing it in my direction. It doesn't really matter. It caught me in the right temple as I turned away, and I went down sideways off the kitchen stool. I didn't lose consciousness, but for a moment I couldn't move, couldn't get my arms and legs to respond, and I was on the floor looking at the baseboard under my refrigerator while my brother stood above me and said, "I'm not kidding. Back off." Then he left. I heard the door close. I heard the elevator down the hall. I lay on the floor for probably 90 seconds before I pushed myself up. The first thing I did, and I know how this sounds, but it's what I was trained to do, it's what the job does to you, was check the device. Still running. Audio and video both captured. Clear sightline from where it sat on the desk to the kitchen pass-through. He'd been visible the entire time. I went to urgent care and got checked out. Minor contusion, no concussion, no imaging needed. The PA asked what happened, and I told her I'd been struck by a falling object. She noted it in the file. I asked her to be specific: ceramic mug, right temporal region, impact from across the room. She looked at me a little funny but wrote it down the way I asked. Then I called the colleague I'd spoken to in February. Then I called the financial crimes unit attorney he'd connected me with. Then I called my mom. That last call was the hardest. She was quiet for a long time after I explained what had happened. Not the bank account thing. She already knew about that in a general way. But the part where he came to my apartment. The part where I ended up on the floor. When she finally spoke, she said, "I want to see the recording." I said, "Mom, I don't think. I want to see it," she said again. Her voice was very steady. "Before anyone else does, I want to see what he did." I drove to Dayton the next morning. I brought my laptop. I sat next to her at her kitchen table and I played it for her. She watched the whole thing without saying a word. When it was over, she closed the laptop herself and sat with her hands folded and looked at the window. Then she said, "Call whoever you need to call." My brother didn't know about my clearance. He didn't know the nature of my actual work. He thought the device on my desk was a webcam with a microphone, maybe a recording setup for virtual meetings. He didn't know it was part of a classified telework security protocol, that everything captured by that device during working hours is automatically logged to a secure server and falls under federal records retention. He didn't know that the moment he made a financial threat to a federal employee actively documenting a case of elder financial abuse. In the presence of federally retained surveillance equipment, he'd handed prosecutors something that made their job significantly easier. He also didn't know that the financial crimes referral I'd sent in February had already been reviewed and flagged. The structured withdrawals, 17 transactions under $3,000 each, met the federal definition of structuring, which is a felony under 31 U.S.C. 5D324, regardless of whether the underlying money was obtained illegally. When I'd sent the referral, I hadn't been sure it would go anywhere. Cases like this are common and prosecutors have discretion, but the pattern was clean. The amounts were significant. And my brother had a prior civil judgment from 2021 involving a business dispute in Indiana that had never been fully satisfied. He wasn't unknown to them. About 6 weeks after this incident in my apartment, 2 federal investigators came to his door. I know this because he called me from the parking lot of a McDonald's 40 minutes later, voice shaking, and told me I had destroyed his life and that I had no idea what I'd done, and that he was going to tell everyone in the family what a cold, calculating robot I was. I let him finish. Then I said, "You owe Mom $38,500, and you put me on the floor in my own kitchen. I have both of those things on record. I would talk to an attorney before you call anyone else." He hung up. The case moved through the system the way these things do, slowly then faster than you expect. My brother retained a criminal defense attorney. He also hired a civil attorney to contest the estate documentation, which went nowhere because my grandmother's estate had been properly filed and had nothing to do with the savings account, which had passed outside of probate. My mom's estate attorney filed a civil claim to recover the $38,500. My brother countered that it was a loan. His attorney requested documentation of the loan agreement. There was none. My mom submitted a sworn affidavit stating she had never agreed to any loan. She said she'd thought the money was going into an investment account in both their names. There was no such account. The federal structuring charge was the piece that ultimately cracked it. His defense was that he hadn't known about the reporting rules. His attorney tried to argue that the structured withdrawals were coincidental, not deliberate. The prosecutors had the transaction log, the amounts, the regularity of the intervals, and my brother's prior business history, which included a year working for a payday lender where structuring education is legally required. That argument didn't hold. He pleaded guilty to 1 count of structuring in exchange for a suspended sentence and 3 years probation. He was also ordered to make full restitution to my mother's account within 18 months plus interest. The civil recovery went through. There was no trial. I didn't have to testify. I want to tell you about the moment I felt it shift, because it wasn't when he pleaded guilty, and it wasn't when the restitution order came through. It was about a month before SAT, our noon when I was back in Dayton, helping my mom rearrange her new apartment. She'd moved into a one-bedroom in a complex near her church, closer to everything she needed, and she'd let go of a lot of furniture in the move, but she'd kept the chair that sat in my grandmother's living room for as long as I can remember. Wide arms, yellow upholstery that had faded to something closer to cream, always positioned near the window. We set the chair in her new living room near the window. My mom sat down in it, looked out at the parking lot and the strip of sky above it, and she said, "Your grandmother would have liked knowing it was you who sorted this out." I said I hadn't really sorted it out, I just reported what I saw. My mom said, "That's what sorting it out looks like most of the time." She asked me to stay for dinner. I did. She made chicken and rice, which is what she always makes, and we watched a home renovation show, and she made fun of every single kitchen they revealed, and I laughed until my sides hurt. It was the most ordinary evening I'd had in months. I drove home that night thinking about how long I'd let my brother be the one who defined me to my family. The loud one, the funny one, the interesting one, and me, the robot, the boring one, the safe choice. I'd let that framing stand for 31 years because it was easier, because confrontation cost something, because I thought keeping the peace was the same as keeping the family together. It isn't, though. I know that now. My brother completed his restitution in 11 months ahead of schedule. I don't know if that was because he found the money somewhere, or because his attorney strongly advised him to demonstrate good faith. I don't particularly care. The money is back in my mom's account. She's using it toward a long-term care plan she's been putting off for 2 years. The local police were not involved, which is a question I've gotten from a few people who know pieces of this story. There was no reason to involve them. The structuring charge is a federal matter, handled federally. The assault, that's what the impact was. Legally, an assault was documented but not separately prosecuted as part of the plea arrangement. I made peace with that. A separate assault charge would have meant a trial, testimony, more time. The outcome that existed gave my mom her money back and kept my brother under federal supervision for 3 years. That felt like enough. It took me a while to get there, to enough. For a long time, I wanted him to fully understand what he'd done. I wanted a moment where he sat across from me and said, "I know I hurt you, and I know I stole from our mother, and I'm genuinely sorry." That moment has not happened. I don't expect it will. What has happened is that my mom knows the truth. What has happened is that the people whose job it is to enforce accountability did their jobs. What has happened is that I went back to my apartment, put a new mug on the shelf, cobalt blue, heavier than the last one, and kept going. I still drive the 10-year-old Civic. I still bring decent wine to family things, though family things are smaller now and simpler. I still work the job I can't fully explain at dinner parties. And when someone calls me the boring one, the responsible one, the safe choice, I don't correct them. I just let them keep thinking that.